Good morning everyone. Now today's class is about peritoneum. We will discuss the peritoneal reflection and its applied aspect. Now peritoneum, this word originates from this Greek word known as peritoneon, and it is it consists of two words, peri that means around and teneo that means to stretch. So these stretching membrane, they wrap around the gut from this periphery, abdominopelvic portion to the gut, and it is the largest serous membrane in the body, and it is a continuous membrane as evident here. The one wrapping the abdominopelvic portion goes around this visceral portion to the organs and the gut tube, and then again comes to this portion of the wall, abdominopelvic wall. So it is a continuous membrane, and because of the presence of a thin amount of peritoneal fluid, it is a glistening and a slippery one, and this facilitate the movement of the gut tube, the peristaltic movement. And since it is only one cell layer thick, which is resting on a thin amount of connective tissue, so it is a transparent one, and it lines the abdominopelvic cavity as shown here, and also invests the viscera, but it has different name uh, according to the organ. Those related to the stomach, they are known as greater and lesser omentum, so here they are known as omentum. Those related to the small gut, small intestine, and these are known as mesentery, and those related to the solid organ, this liver or the portion of the spleen, they are known as ligament. So in case of male, it is a closed sac, whereas in case of female, it is open at the lateral end of the uterine tube. So in case, now let's understand the ultrastructure or the microanatomy of these peritoneal reflections. And the peritoneum, as evident here in this sectional view of the stomach, and in this outermost layer we can see this is the visceral peritoneum or the serosa, and it consists of these flattened cells. So it consists of a single layer of flat mesothelial cells lying on a layer of loose connective tissue, which is the lamina propria. And like these epithelial cells, these mesothelial cells, they are also joined by junctional complexes, and beneath these single layer of mesothelium is a well developed basement membrane on which they rest, and outside these is a rich lymphatic plexus in this lamina propria. Now these may be fenestrated at various sites. They are porous and they permit the passage of macrophages. Now this subendothelial connective tissue, it also contains macrophages, lymphocyte as well as adipocytes, and these mesothelial cells, they transform into fibroblast, and that explains their involvement in case of inflammation like the peritonitis or post-surgical peritoneal adhesion. Peritoneum, it has a rich vascular supply, and that includes the lymphatic as well. But these lymphatics, they have these multiple site of lymphoid aggregates, and these are known as milky spots, being paler than other portion. And these have these characteristic numerous capillary convolutions, and these are known as omental glomeruli, being convoluted. And at peritoneal stomata, which is also known as the mesothelial pores. The mesothelium here is juxtaposition to the underlying lymphatic endothelial cells, and in this portion there is no intervening basement membrane, and because of that this portion is more porous, especially to the passage of these pneumatic cells like the macrophages and other cells. Here in this diagram we can see in this submesothelial connective tissue there is a lymphoid aggregate, and this is the milky spot. Now this milky spot, it contains this convoluted capillary. So this convoluted capillary, this forms the omental glomeruli with this typical convolutions, and here also is visible this interrupted basement membrane, where these mesothelial cells, they are directly positioned to the endothelial cells without intervening basement membrane. So this portion is more porous to these macrophages and other nomadic cells, and these peritoneal stomata as well as the milky spots in the omentum, they contribute to the absorption of the peritoneal fluid, and when they are occluded by the malignant cells, the ascites occurs. Now similar to the pleural cavity or pericardial cavity, which are lined by pleura and pericardium respectively, the abdominophallic cavity is lined by peritoneum. It is made of these two continuous layers: a parietal peritoneum, which lines the internal surface of the anterior and the posterior abdominal wall, the lateral wall of the pelvis, and the under surface of the diaphragm, and these are derived from the somatopleuric layer of the mesoderm, and hence it has this segmental somatic nerve supply, and it is sensitive to pressure, pain, heat, cold, and laceration. Now at places from this parietal peritoneum, the peritoneal reflex, and it invests the viscera, especially from this posterior abdominal wall or from the diaphragm and from the lateral wall of the pelvis. So they invest the viscera such as the stomach, the intestine, or in case of the pelvis, the uterus or the part of the bladder. So it often blends with their connective tissue, and this visceral peritoneum, it is derived from the splanchnopubic layer of the mesoderm. So it is insensitive to pressure, pain, heat, cold, and laceration, but it is stimulated primarily by the stretching and chemical irritation, and thereby a dull pain is perceived. That shows the involvement of. Now the peritoneal cavity is again the similar to the pericardial or the pleural cavity. It is a capillary thin space between the parietal and the visceral layer of the peritoneum. It contains no organ or gas, and it contains a small amount of peritoneal fluid that rarely exceeds 5 ml in healthy male and postmenopausal females, though the amount is more in case of adult female, and it also varies depending on its menstrual phase. So roughly it is about 25 ml. Now the normal peritoneal fluid contains water, protein, electrolyte, and solutes, and they are largely derived from the interstitial fluid. It contains also a few cells, including these squamated mesothelial cells, the wandering peritoneal macrophages, mast cells, fibroblasts, lymphocytes, and other leukocytes. And the fluid, it is largely absorbed through this peritoneal stomata and these milky spots, the lymph. Now about the flow and the absorption of this peritoneal fluid. the peritoneal fluid being a fluid, it gravitates to the dependent site, like this lower abdominopelvic portion in case of erect posture, or this hepatorenal pouch of Morrison, or the right subhepatic space in case of the supine position. And from these dependent portion, the fluid finally it gravitates towards the right subhepatic and right subphrenic spaces, and this is only because of the diaphragmatic respiratory movement, the negative intrathoracic pressure, and the intestinal movement, the peristaltic movement. These encourage the flow of the peritoneal fluid from this lower abdominopelvic portion or the right subhepatic portion towards the subphrenic spaces, and this occurs through this right paracolic gutter. This is the preferential way only because there is no hindrance of phrenicocholic ligament here, and also it is more deeper than that on the left side. So fluid movement is mainly in a clockwise direction, and here this portion of the subdiaphragmatic portion and the related anterior abdominal wall, it contains plenty of peritoneal stomata as well as the milky spots for the reabsorption of this peritoneal fluid. Now, because of disruption of integrity of peritoneum, because of intestinal surgery or laparoscopic procedure, they create these sticky sites where the pathogen or the malignant cells they settle and they proliferate and they cause these peritoneal adhesion. Let's understand the development of the peritoneum. That will ease the understanding of the peritoneal reflections. So here it is shown the gut tube and its derivatives. They are wrapped and suspended by this bilayered mesenteries, which attach it to the dorsal and ventral body wall, and they are accordingly named as ventral and dorsal mesenteries. Now the ventral mesentery, it undergoes resorptions except in the region of the foregut, and this ventral mesentery it is derived from the septum transversum. And here in this region of the foregut, in the dorsal mesentery, the liver starts growing, and it grows so enormously that only two portions are remained. One between the ventral body wall and the liver, this is known as the falciform ligament, and one between the liver and the region of the foregut. This is known as the lesser omentum. So these are the only two remnants. Now the dorsal mesentery, as we know the mesentery proper, this is the dorsal mesentery, and it is derived from this lower portion of the pericardio-peritoneal canal and the somatopleuric and splanchnopeoric mesodermal portion derived from the lower part of the foregut, majority of the midgut, and upper portion of the hindgut, and the derivative are dorsal mesogastrium, which latter forms the greater omentum, then this dorsal mesoduodenum, then is the dorsal mesentery, which is the wrapping around the jejunum and ileal loop, and this forms the mesentery proper, and in the lower portion is the dorsal mesocolon. So the dorsal mesentery, it forms all the other mesentery in the adult, and it also wraps the branches is the vascularity and branches is supplies these portion of the gut tube and its derivatives. With respect to the peritoneal covering in relation to the viscera, they are three type of organs: intraperitoneal, extraperitoneal, and retroperitoneal organs, which are also known as secondary retroperitoneal organs. Now, the intraperitoneal organs, they are almost completely covered by the visceral peritoneum, all the sides. Now, there are four separate intraperitoneal bowel loop suspended by the mesenteries of variable length, and that includes the first one is that includes abdominal esophagus, stomach, and first part of the duodenum. Then the second bowel loop includes the duodenojejunal junction, jejunum, ileum, and usually the cecum. Third portion includes the transverse colon, and fourth the sigmoid colon. These visceral peritoneum, they enclose this viscera and suspend it within the peritoneal cavity. And finally, it is attached to the posterior abdominal wall, and these suspending portions, they are known as ligaments or mesenteries or omentum. Now here in this diagram, what is shown is the intraperitoneal organs have been removed, and what is shown here are either the retroperitoneal organs or the extraperitoneal organs. So what is shown here is these four segment of bowel loop variable length, which are suspended by the mesenteries and which connect them to the posterior abdominal wall. So their connections, these mesentery, they have been cut, and the loop which is intraperitoneal, it has been removed. So first segment, it comprises of this distal portion of the esophagus, then stomach with this connection. This is the portion showing the greater omentum has been removed. This is the lesser omentum being removed, and this is the first part of the duodenum. So this is the first segment comprising of the distal esophagus, stomach, and first part of the duodenum. Then second portion, second segment comprising of this duodenojejunal junction, then the jejunum and ileal loops, and cecum. So here the root of mesentery has been cut, and this bowel loop has been removed. This is the third segment comprising of transverse colon. Transverse mesocolon here is cut, and the transverse colon, it has been removed. And this is the fourth segment comprising of this sigmoid mesocolon. The sigmoid colon has been removed. These are the four segments. Now the next is the retroperitoneal organ, and these are covered only on the anterior aspect by the visceral peritoneum, and posteriorly they are in relation to the posterior abdominal wall. Now these are also known as secondary retroperitoneal organs only because they are derived because of the migration and finally subsequent fixation of the part of the gastrointestinal tract or segment. Now it includes most of the duodenum, pancreas, ascending and descending colon, and rectum. Now initially these organs, they were covered all around by the visceral peritoneum on the anterior aspect and this parietal peritoneum on the posterior aspect. Finally, the parietal peritoneum in relation to the posterior abdominal wall, it is resolved during the developmental process, and this segment is fixed, or the organ, it is fixed to the posterior abdominal wall, being only anteriorly covered by the visceral peritoneum, like the pancreas, which was originally covered all around by the visceral peritoneum, but after migration and subsequent fixation, it is fixed. So This is secondly retroperitoneal. And third is the extraperitoneal organs. They lie between the parietal peritoneum and the posterior abdominal wall, and they have only the parietal peritoneum on their anterior surface. And the example, it include the kidneys. Though there is always there is a fourth subtype also, which is also known as infraperitoneal or subperitoneal organs, because as we know, this peritoneum, it sweeps just before the end of the pelvis. So the terminal portion of the rectum or the bladder, they are lying beneath the peritoneum, so that forms the infraperitoneal part or subperitoneal part. For better understanding, we will discuss the peritoneum under three headings: peritoneum of the upper abdomen, peritoneum of the lower abdomen, and peritoneum of the pelvis, which will include the peritoneum of the male and female pelvis since they differ. Now, under the heading of the peritoneum of the upper abdomen, it will include the peritoneum related to the abdominal part of the esophagus, stomach, liver, and spleen, and they develop from the embryonic mesogastrium, ventral and dorsal. Now, it includes the peritoneum of the liver, which we will discuss under the heading of the falciform ligament, coronary ligament, triangular ligament, and lesser omentum. Then peritoneum of the stomach, in which we will discuss the greater and lesser omentum. Then peritoneum of the spleen, in which the gastrosplenic, splenorenal or linorenal ligament, and phrenicocholic ligament will be discussed. Now let's understand the peritoneal connections of the liver, and it could only be understood by understanding the development of the peritoneum along with the development of the liver. As the liver start growing in the ventral mesogastrium, wrapped all around by the peritoneal covering, which attach it to the ventral body wall, which makes the ligamentum falciparum, and posteriorly it is connected to the developing foregut, which is known as the lesser omentum, and superiorly it is connected to the undersurface of the diaphragm. So it is wrapped all around by the peritoneal covering. Now, as the liver grows, and it grows so enormously and rapidly, it tilts towards the right, and now it is located rather than ventrally to the foregut, it is now in the right side of the upper abdominal portion, and along with that it also rotates the foregut also, especially the stomach. So now the liver lying in the right side and is still connected to the diaphragm. As it is growing rapidly, it divides into its two major lobes. So this superior diaphragmatic connection, it now bifurcates, and this bifurcation, this forms the right and left triangular ligament. So the single connection, it is now duplicated, and with further development of the right lobe, which grows much more than that of the left lobe, this single communication or connection to the peritoneum, before merging it bifurcate again, and this bifurcation, it forms the coronary ligament, superior and inferior coronary ligament, and the area between these two, it is in direct contact with the diaphragm, and this forms the bare area. It is devoid of any peritoneal covering, so it is the bare area of the liver. So the ligaments now are two triangular ligament, and on the right side, this is the superior and inferior coronary ligament, along with falciform ligament, on the lower margin of which is the round ligament of liver, ligamentum teres, and the connection to the stomach and first part of the duodenum, This is the portion forming the lesser omentum. Now the falciform ligament, it is this thin double fold of the peritoneum that connects liver to the posterior aspect of the anterior abdominal wall, more so on the right side. And this anteroposterior fold, it is wider inferiorly, which is up to the level of the umbilicus, and it is narrows down as we trace it superiorly. As the distance between the liver and the anterior abdominal wall, it decreases. So on the superior aspect, it is mere 1 to 2 centimeter wide. And inferior margin of this bilayered peritoneum, this is in continuity with each other, and in this free lower margin it contains this round ligament of the liver, which is the remnant of the fetor umbilical vein, and this also contains this para umbilical vein, which is an important portocaval anastomosis, which may cause in case of portal hypertension. Now this reflect above on the diaphragm and liver as right coronary ligament and left triangular ligament. This is the view of the visceral surface of the liver, and here these various ligaments are shown. On the edges we can see these are the triangular ligament. This is the right triangular ligament and this is the left triangular ligament connecting it to the diaphragm. Now before merger, these are these bifurcated margin of the ligament on both sides, and these form the coronary ligament. On the left side, the area between these two coronary ligament is very less, and these form only the anterior and posterior margin of the coronary ligament on the left side. But on the right side, since they are bifurcated widely, so they are known as superior and inferior layer of the coronary ligament, and the wide area in between, this is in direct contact with the undersurface of the diaphragm, and this is devoid of any peritoneal covering, so this makes the bare area of the liver. And also it is shown here, this is the fissure lying between the caudate lobe and the left lobe. This contains a ligament which is known as the ligamentum venosum, which is the remnant of ductus venosus. So this is the fissure for the ligamentum venosum. Now the lesser omentum, as we have already discussed, it is a derivative of the ventral mesogastrium, and it runs between the visceral surface of the liver to the abdominal part of the esophagus, stomach up to its pyloric end and the first part of the duodenum. Now the attachment to the visceral surface of the liver is L-shaped, in which the vertical limb is formed by the fissure for the ligamentum venosum and the horizontal limb running horizontally and completed at the porta hepatis. So refer to the previous slide regarding the ligament of the liver. Now the attachment to this gut tube, initially it is this portion which is running between the liver and the abdominal part of the esophagus, and this portion is extremely thin, known as the hepatoesophageal component or the ligament. Then these two distinct portion which is running between the stomach, lesser curvature of the stomach, and the liver, this is known as gastrohepatic ligament, and the one running even thicker, and this is the one running between the first part of the duodenum and the liver. So this portion is known as the hepatoduodenal ligament. So remember, this portion is then free. Now from here, this layer bilayered, since it is, so the layers they split and they enclose the abdominal part of the esophagus, stomach, and the first part of the duodenum. So they split as anterior layer which runs ventrally and a posterior layer which runs dorsal to the stomach and abdominal esophagus and first part of the duodenum. Then they again merge at this greater omentum. So this portion, the gastrohepatic ligament, it contains variable amount of fat, especially near the stomach end and gastric end, and this portion also contains the right and left gastric vessels and the branches of the vagus nerve along with the lymphatic and lymph node, and these are also near the gastric end. Here the lesser omentum has been removed to show the boundaries of the epiphytic foramen, and here we can see this thickened anterior boundary of this epiphytic foramen, and the epiphytic foramen, it is also known as the foramen of Winslow or omental foramen or adductus to the lesser sac. Now that the boundaries related to this anterior boundary, it is the thickened boundary. It contains this bile duct which is anteriorly and to the right, then hepatic artery proper which is again anteriorly but to the left, and posteriorly is the portal vein. So they can be palpated here through this right free margin, and the posteriorly is this inferior vena cava which is covered by the peritoneum. Superiorly is this caudate lobe of the liver, and inferiorly is this first part of the duodenum which is the superior part. So these are the boundaries of the epiphytic foramen. Now as soon as the abdomen is opened, this largest peritoneal fold hanging from the greater curvature of the stomach is seen, and it hangs inferiorly from the greater curvature of the stomach, and it wraps the upper abdominal organ, especially the coils of the small intestine. So this largest fold is known as the greater omentum, and this often contains a variable amount of fat, which is more in case of the obese individuals. Now this greater omentum, it is a bilayered fold of peritoneum which folds upon itself to form a bilaminar sheet. So the first layer, it becomes the posterior most, that is the fourth layer, and the second layer of the peritoneum, it forms the third layer when it is folded. We will discuss that later. Now it is divisible into three parts. The part joining this greater curvature of the stomach and the first part of the duodenum inferiorly, and it connects to the transverse colon, adherent to the portion of the transverse colon. Now this portion is known as gastrocolic ligament. Now this left side of the greater omentum, this envelops this spleen on the left side, except a small area on the hilum of the spleen which is a bare area. So this portion is known as gastrosplenic ligament, and a fold of peritoneum which connects the fundus of the stomach to the left hemidiaphragm. This portion is known as gastrophrenic ligament. Now this gastrocolic ligament, it contains the vascularity of the omentum which is the right and left gastroepiploic vessels. So this bilaminar lesser omentum is split at the lesser curvature of the stomach to enclose the anterior and the posterior surfaces of the stomach as well as the first part of the duodenum. Now they again reunite at the greater curvature of the stomach, and then they descend downward and forward up to a variable distance, forming the anterior sheet of the greater omentum. Now then they abruptly folded backward and then they ascend. So as they ascend, this first layer, it becomes the fourth layer or the posterior most layer of the posterior sheet, and this second layer, it becomes the third layer, which is the anterior layer of or anterior lamina of the posterior sheet. So that's how these double sheet are formed. Double sheet of the greater omentum are formed, which are both composed of bilaminar sheet of the peritoneum. Now these posterior sheet, it passes just anterior to the transverse colon and its mesentery, which is the transverse mesocolon, as well as the body and the head of the pancreas. And then this posterior lamina of the posterior sheet, it is attached just above the attachment of the transverse mesocolon. And this anterior lamina of the posterior sheet, it is in continuity with the posterior wall of the lesser sac. Now this second and third layer, the posterior lamina of the anterior sheet and anterior lamina of the posterior sheet, they are often, mostly they are connected by the connective tissue and they are fused to each other. So beyond the transverse colon, these two layers, these four layers, in fact they are fused, and this posterior sheet of the posterior lamina of the posterior sheet, it is, since it is in close approximation to the transverse mesocolon, so it is attached to this or fused to this transverse mesocolon. So that's how this connection, peritoneal connection between this inferior surface of the lesser curvature up to the transverse colon, it forms this ligament, which is known as gastrocolic ligament. And the greater omentum, it is a richly vascular structure being supplied by the right gastroepiploic artery, which is the terminal branch of gastroduodenal artery, and left gastroepiploic artery, which is a branch of splenic artery. Now these branches and their branches to the peritoneum, they lie within the folds of the peritoneum, and they anastomose with each other and give branches along the entire length of the greater omentum. That's why this greater omentum is a richly vascular structure. Now the peritoneum in general and omentum in particular functions as an organ where a group of tissue, they act for a specific function, and that function is to maintain the homeostasis and the environment of the abdominal cavity, and hence it is often known as the policeman of the abdomen. Now we have discussed it has a rich vascularity, and the capillaries in them, they have fenestrated endothelial cells, and capillary, they also form this rounded formation known as omental glomeruli. So these omental glomeruli, they are lined by the fenestrated endothelium, and the adjacent mesothelium, it is also fenestrated, and they form the peritoneal stomata. And also there are milky spots where there is a focal localization of macrophages as well as the lymphocytes, and these are the sites of leukocyte migration in case of inflammation. And also these peritoneal stomata, they are the active site of peritoneal fluid absorption when there is a excess of fluid is being formed because of inflammation or any other reason. Now it acts as a highly mobile organ, and it is frequently become adherent to the inflamed viscera or when there is a foreign body within the abdominal cavity. And adhesion is only because these mesothelial cells, they transform into fibroblastic cells, causing the adhesion to this inflamed viscera or the foreign body, and that's how they limit the spread of the infection. Now we have discussed it, the peritoneal stomata, they act as the absorber of the peritoneal fluid, they absorb the peritoneal fluid. Then it promotes the neovascularization of the structure to which it is adherent, because they are a fibroblastic growth factor and other, they promote the neovascularization. Now it is also the site of adipose tissue stores, and there is varying amount of fat in them depending on the whether the individually lean or it is a fat one. And there are studies which are ongoing which shows it secretes some hormones which are anti-obesity hormones. The spleen, as it develops into the dorsal mesogastrium, it is wrapped all around by the visceral peritoneum, and the bilayered fold of the this greater omentum, it passes from the left side of the greater curvature just above the hilum of the spleen as the gastrosplenic ligament. Now this peritoneal reflection also they pass from the just behind the hilum of the spleen backward onto the left kidney as the lienorenal ligament or splenorenal ligament, and a part of this much backward and laterally they connect it to the diaphragm also, and this is known as splenophrenic ligament. Now at this splenic flexor of the colon or the colic impression on the spleen, this portion, it is connected to the colic flexor by some of the fiber of the peritoneal reflection, and this is known as colicosplenic ligament, and these are the part of this phreniocolic ligament which connects the splenic flexor of the colon to the left hemidiaphragm. Now in this sectional view, let's understand these two important ligament related to the spleen and their convergence at the hilum of the spleen. Now this is the gastrosplenic ligament, and this has this anterior layer which is in continuity from the gastric impression on the spleen, and then it is continuous over the peritoneal covering the anterior surface of the stomach, and this is the posterior layer of the gastrosplenic ligament. It is in continuity from the peritoneal covering over the hilum of the spleen, and then it is continuous over the peritoneal covering over the posterior surface of the stomach, forming the wall of the lesser sac. Now this between these two layers of the gastrosplenic ligament, they contain the short gastric and left gastroepiploic vessels, which are the branches of splenic vessels. Now this is the lienorenal or splenorenal ligament. it also consists of these two layers. This is the anterior layer. Anterior layer, it is medially, it is the reflection from this peritoneal covering the posterior wall of the lesser sac over the left kidney, and that it is at the hilum. Then it is in continuity with the peritoneal covering over the posterior surface of the stomach. And this is the posterior layer which has this peritoneal covering onto the renal impression on the spleen, and then it is in continuity over the left hemidiaphragm, and between the two layers of the lienorenal ligament it contains the splenic vessels along with the tail of the pancreas. Now from this lower surface of the gastrosplenic ligament, a fan-shaped ligament is reflected, which is known as phrenicocholic ligament. Now in this diagram, the stomach has been cut and the lesser sac has been exposed to show the peritoneal connections of the spleen. So here we can see how at the hilum this gastrosplenic ligament, which is connecting this left portion of the greater curvature of the stomach, which is the greater omentum bilayered portion. So we can see this is the anterior layer and this is the posterior layer, and this posterior layer then it is in continuity with the this anterior layer of the splenorenal ligament, and this contains the tail of the pancreas between its fold as well as the splenic artery. And in this gastrosplenic ligament we can see this is the short gastric as well as the left gastroepiploic vessels. Now from this lower pole of the gastrosplenic ligament we can see this is the fan-shaped reflection known as the phrenicocholic ligament, and it also connects this splenic flexure of the colon to the spleen, this cholic impression of the spleen as the splenocholic ligament, a part of this phrenicocholic ligament. Now when this spleen is reflected or tilted medially, we can see the posterior layer of the lienorenal ligament or splenorenal ligament, and we can see how a part of this is connected to the left hemidiaphragm as the splenophrenic ligament. Let's understand the peritoneal reflection of the lower abdomen. In this view, the jejunal and aerial loop they have been removed by cutting at the root of the mesentery, and the ascending, transverse and descending colon and the sigmoid colon they have been removed, and transverse and the sigmoid colon has been removed by cutting at their mesentery, whereas these secondary retroperitoneal portion of the ascending and descending colon has been removed. So the parietal peritoneum it extends from this median linea alba to the lateral paracolic gutter. This is the right paracolic gutter shown here, and this is the left paracolic gutter, and here they are reflected over the front and the sides of the ascending colon on the right side and the descending colon on the left side. And since these both portion of the colon, the ascending and descending, they become secondary retroperitoneals, so they are posteriorly directly related to the posterior abdominal wall. Here there is no peritoneum, showing they are retroperitoneal portion. Now between these two, the peritoneum it covers the posterior abdominal wall, where they are covering the psoas major and quadratus lumborum as well as the inferior vena cava, the abdominal aorta and bifurcation into the common iliac and the ureter, and the above portion the duodenum except the first part. So these are covered at the posterior abdominal wall by the parietal peritoneum. So between these two, the peritoneum, it covers the posterior abdominal, and other than except these two portion are remain. One is the oblique root of the mesentery and second is the transverse mesocolon. The mesentery of the small intestine, it is a bilayered long fold of the peritoneum wrapping the jejunal and ileal loop and attaching it to the posterior abdominal wall, and that's how a complex fan is being formed. Since this attached part is shorter and this is lying obliquely and it is only 15 centimeter long, starting at the duodenojejunal flexor at the second lumbar vertebra and ending at the right sacroiliac joint. So that's how this is obliquely placed. Now the free or the mobile border, which is the intestinal border, it is of the same length as that of the intestinal coils, that is 5 meters, and that's how it provides a very high mobility. Now the depth of average depth is 20 centimeter, though it varies, it is lesser. So at the both terminal end, at the this duodenojejunal junction and at the terminal ileal portion. Now between the two peritoneal folds, it contains the jejunal and ileal branches of the superior mesenteric artery, the nerves related to the superior mesenteric plexus, and since it has a high lymphatic drainage, so it contains the lymphatic and the regional lymph nodes. So as we have discussed, this attached portion of the mesentery of the small intestine is lying obliquely, which is known as the root of the mesentery, and in the course, this oblique course, it crosses several structures. So initially it crosses the third part of the duodenum and the abdominal aorta and inferior vena cava. Then it crosses the right ureter and the right psoas major. Now the mesentery of the transverse colon is known as transverse mesocolon, and it wraps the transverse colon completely and suspend it from the posterior abdominal wall. Now its posterior attachment to the posterior abdominal wall is known as the root of the transverse mesocolon. Now it is lying obliquely and at the right extreme near the hepatic flexor, it is lying just anterior to the second part of the duodenum. Then it passes on to the head and the body of the pancreas, lying just above the duodenojejunal flexor, then onto the upper pole of the left kidney, then continues up to the splenic flexor of the colon. So this is the obliquely lying root of the transverse mesocolon. Now from here, these bilayered fold, they passes onto the posterior surface of the transverse colon and they invest it completely. That's why this portion is a mobile one. Now here, this superior layer, it is in continuity with the posterior layer of the greater omentum, as shown here. This superior upper layer is in continuity with the posterior layer of the greater omentum, and this is in close approximation, and they are fused with each other, adheres to each other. And this inferior layer, this is in continuity with the peritoneum of the posterior abdominal wall. Now at both the extreme. At the hepatic flexor, it gives a peritoneal reflection to the second part of the duodenum, and this portion is known as duodenocolic ligament. And at the splenic flexor, it again provides a fan-shaped reflection to the diaphragm known as phrenicocholic ligament. Now between these two layers, it contains the vascularity of this portion, which is the middle colic vessels along with the autonomic nerves and varying amount of adipose tissue. Now mesentery of the appendix is known as the mesoappendix, and it is a triangular fold of peritoneum lying just close to the mesentery of the terminal part of the ileum near the ileocecal junction, and it contains between its fold appendicular artery, varying amount of fat, lymphatics, and often a lymph node. The bilayered fold of the peritoneum suspending the sigmoid colon by completely investing it and attaching it to the posterior abdominal wall is known as the sigmoid mesocolon. Now it has this attached portion to the posterior abdominal wall, which is known as the root of the sigmoid mesocolon, and it is an inverted V-shaped portion. Now the apex of the V, it overlies the bifurcation of the left common iliac artery, and this apex, it is also related to the descent of the left ureter into the pelvis. Now its left shorter limb, it is related to the left psoas major, and it overlies the left external iliac artery, and this longer right limb, it passes over the pelvic rim, and it is related to the third sacral vertebra. Now between this fold, it contains the sigmoid and the superior rectal vessels. Now one of the characteristic features found in the colon are these epiploic appendices, and these are the peritoneal line subserosal adipose tissue, and they are found throughout the colon, right from the very beginning at the cecum up to this rectosigmoid junction. The rectum, it is completely devoid of these epiploic appendices. The peritoneal reflection varies in male and the female pelvis. The parietal peritoneum lining the abdominal wall, it is continuous with the parietal peritoneum lining the side wall of the pelvis, but it doesn't reach up to the pelvic floor, rather it is reflected onto the pelvic viscera like the urinary bladder, rectum, or uterus in case of female. Now the peritoneal lining from this sigmoid colon, distal sigmoid colon, and anterolateral surface of the upper rectum, it is reflected onto the side wall of the true pelvis, thereby creating a pararectal pouch on the either side of the rectum. And this pararectal pouch, it varies in dimension depending on the distension of the rectum, so it is loosely adherent. Now from this anterior surface of the upper part of the rectum, the peritoneum is reflected onto the posterior surface of the urinary bladder, thereby creating a rectovesical pouch. And from the anterosuperior surface of the urinary bladder, the peritoneal line is reflected sidewards, creating a paravesical pouch on the either side, which is limited laterally by the ductus deferens. Now between the paravesical and pararectal pouch, the peritoneum is elevated by the ureter and the internal iliac vessels. Now from the apex of the urinary bladder, midline fold is a midline fold reaches up to the posterior wall of the posterior surface of the anterior abdominal wall up to the umbilicus, creating a median umbilical. Peritoneal reflection of the female pelvis is essentially the same as that of the male pelvis, except because of the presence of the uterus and the vagina. This single rectovesical pouch is now divided into two pouches, a posteriorly lying deeper rectouterine pouch and anteriorly lying shallower vesicouterine pouch. Now the peritoneal covering from the upper part of the anterior surface of the rectum is reflected onto the posterior fornix of the vagina and the posterior surface of the uterus, covering the fundus and the body of the uterus, thereby creating a deeper rectouterine pouch. And from here, the peritoneal covering it descends onto the anterior surface of the uterus up to the junction between the body and the cervix, and from here the peritoneal reflection is reflected anteriorly onto the posterior surface of the urinary bladder, and afterwards the reflection is similar to that of the male pelvis anteriorly onto the posterior surface of the anterior abdominal wall. Now these anterior and the posterior peritoneal covering of the uterus, it is reflected onto the side wall of the pelvis, creating this broad ligament, and along its upper free border, this broad ligament, it contains this uterine tube, and this peritoneal cavity, it is open at the lateral end of the uterine tube, and along its posterior surface it contains the ovary. Now these two pouches, which are the pararectal pouch and paravesical pouch, they are limited by this uterosacral ligament and round ligament respectively in case of female. The peritoneum of the lower anterior abdominal wall is divided into 5 diverging folds from the umbilicus, and they are also referred to as ligaments. So there is this median umbilical ligament, and on the both sides they are medial and lateral umbilical ligaments. So this is the interior view of the lower part of anterior abdominal wall, and here we can see this is the median umbilical fold extending from the apex of the urinary bladder up to the umbilicus, and contains the urachus or its remnant. And just lateral to it on both sides are the medial umbilical fold containing the obliterated umbilical artery, and it extends from the internal iliac artery in the pelvis up to the umbilicus. Now just lateral to it is this lateral umbilical fold, which is raised by the inferior epigastric vessels, and though it is known as the lateral umbilical fold, it doesn't reach it up to the umbilicus, rather it reaches up to the arcuate line in the rectus sheath. Now between these raised fold there are some fossa, so just lateral to the or between the median and the medial umbilical fold on both sides are this supravesical fold. Now between the medial umbilical fold and lateral umbilical fold is this medial inguinal fossa, which overlies the femoral ring, and just lateral to the lateral umbilical fold is this lateral inguinal fossa, which overlies the deep inguinal ring. The neurovascularity of the parietal and the visceral peritoneum is governed by their developmental embryology. Parietal peritoneum, visceral peritoneum, develops from the somatopleuric and splanchnopeoric layers of the lateral plate mesoderm respectively. Hence, the parietal peritoneum, it is supplied by the somatic blood vessels, and the visceral peritoneum being the integral part of the viscera it covers, so it gets this blood supply and drainage from the corresponding part of the viscera it covers. Now the parietal peritoneum, it is innervated by the somatic efferent and afferent nerves that also supply the muscles and the skin of the overlying body wall. And when the parietal peritoneum is irritated, the local reflex muscle contraction it occurs, which results in the clinical sign of guarding or even rigidity of the abdominal wall. And the parietal peritoneum of the diaphragm, the central part, it is supplied by the phrenic nerve, and its referred pain is perceived in the neck and the shoulder. And peripheral part gets its supply from the lower intercostal and subcostal nerve, and the referred pain is perceived in the lower thoracic region. That's all about the peritoneal reflection.